Director Carr is away on board business, has asked to be excused. Director Garcia has also asked to be excused tonight. Director Gokul Gandhi.
Present.
Director Herndon.
Present.
Director Leonard.
Present.
Director O'Halloran.
Present.
Director Seamson.
Present.
Vice President Taylor.
In attendance.
President Peterson.
Present.
We have 7 present.
Will the secretary please read the call of the meeting?
The following meeting is scheduled to take place in the auditorium of the Central Services Building at 5225 West Belich Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for consideration of the following items of business. Number 1, action on a request to approve the 2022-23 proposed fall budget adjustments to the adopted FY23 budget. And then, number 2, there is a work session on amendments to the preliminary adopted FY23 budget. And number 3, the board will go into its retreat on strategic planning and budget, talking about the timeline and providing an update on the process. The meeting is scheduled to begin at 5:30 and to end not later than 8 p.m. Members of the public who wish to attend the meeting in person must adhere to the MPS mask policies regardless of the vaccination status or past COVID infection. The meeting is also being broadcast via live stream, audio, and via MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found at the MPS broadcast page. Public testimony will not be taken during the meeting.
Thank you. The chair will now ask the secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so and asks those who do not wish to participate, please remain silent during the recitation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will now read the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Milwaukee lies on traditional Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk homeland along the southwest shores of Lake Michigan, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. On this site, the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnick River meet, and the people of Wisconsin's Menominee, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Oneida, and Mohican sovereign nations remain present to this day. This meeting is being conducted in person from Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public access and participation as possible, this meeting is also being broadcast via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links of which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Gracias. Just as a reminder, we will not be taking public testimony at tonight's meeting. Written testimony will be accepted for transmittal to the board. Send this testimony to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53201, 2181, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email it to governance at milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Also, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the Meetings, Agenda, and Minutes page on the MPS website and choosing Online Agendas. Now let's begin. Madam Secretary, item 1.
Item number 1 is action on a request to approve the 22-23 proposed fall budget adjustments to the adopted FY23 budget. The recommendation is that the board adopt the fall budget changes, including ESSER, as proposed, and that the annual budgetary resolutions be adopted as indicated in attachment number 2 to this item. Mr. President?
Yes.
Given that item 2 potentially affects the budget, I ask that we dispense with item 2 before the board takes action on item number 1.
If there are no objections, we will defer this item until after we dispense with item 2. Seeing no objections, let's go to item 2. Madam Secretary, could you please explain that?
Item number 2 is a work session on amendments to the preliminary adopted FY23 budget. The recommendation is that the board determine how it wishes to proceed with this item.
At this time, we will hold a work session to consider amendments. As this was a work session, and as is customary and publicly noticed, we will not be taking public testimony on this item. For each amendment, I will ask for a motion for discussion purposes. We will discuss and take action on that amendment before moving to the next one. Madam Secretary, what's the first amendment?
The first amendment is amendment number 13 by Director Leonard, and that is to allocate funds to expand Fairview Elementary School.
Does Director Leonard wish to make any comments?
I do. So first of all, I first of all wanted to just commend, and I'm going to actually thank everyone that's been involved with the process. It was actually a team process, and I want to thank Dr. Posley for actually helping me with the leadership in this to move this forward. So I'm just going to mention some names. I want to thank them publicly. I appreciate the fact that we spent some time really working this out. Dr. Posley, Mr. Galvan, Martha Kreitzman, Sean Kane, Dr. Mann, and Board Governance, and Matt Chasen. It really is when I I found the money that could be used for this. Martha Kreitzman actually helped me with this and with a lot of help to make sure that it was available for Fairview School. I had made this presentation initially a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, but we shelved that because of various reasons. But what I have found is that I do not want to leave any money sitting on the table with regards to utilizing the funds that have been available to us through ESSER, and really just this last week being told that there was about $60 million that was not spent from even this year's budget. Fairview School is by far overpacked. They are not meeting the expectations of the regional development plan. Today I was there just recounting the numbers of students in classrooms. We are definitely exceeding any kind of fair numbers. The sixth grades alone are, I believe, 36 students plus in each classroom. So this expansion of their school would make a significant difference. The money will be spent wisely and effectively. It will not be an opportunity we ever get again. That is without question. So I am asking my colleagues to support the action to definitely expand Fairview School and make sure we get those classroom sizes the right way. This also includes the building of a gym, because when I talked to Mr. Sullivan from Fairview, and he went over the gym is very small, the current one, and with a middle school this size, that gym has become highly ineffective. We would have to, I don't even know how we could safely keep classes going on in there. So this expansion would include both a gym and a new 7th and 8th grade building. There's no question that the community would support the the expansion, they would also easily be able to afford filling those spaces in there. He's, I believe, 5 or 6 students per classroom, greater than what they have capacity for now. And I really think it's higher than that. Mr. Sullivan told me today that he feels like they could easily rebuild a whole new school there and fill it up at this point in time. We've had about a 4% increase in population in that neighborhood, and they are definitely applying to go to Fairview School. I guess I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Director Leonard, could you just make a motion for this so we can continue the discussion? Could you?
Sure. I might need help with the motion, excuse me.
Move.
I move that we discuss the expansion
no.
program.
Approve the amendment.
Approve the amendment. I'm sorry, we're way past where I am. I apologize. I move that we approve the amendment for the expansion of the Fairview School.
So noted.
Okay. Administration, would you care to comment?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we
Would
do
you
need
se-
a second on that motion for
Okay.
discussion.
Could I have a second? Director Taylor has seconded it.
Thank you.
Administration.
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. Amendment number 13 is in regards to an addition to Fairview School. The administration recommends putting funding towards this project. In addition, the administration would like the opportunity to bring back a plan allowing for updates to additional schools on the north side of Milwaukee no later than December 2022. I will now turn it over to Martha Kreisman, Chief Financial Officer, for other comments. Martha.
Thank you, Dr. Posley. President Peterson and members of the board, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The cost of the addition to Fairview School is estimated at $8.7 million. This would be in addition to the already approved renovation cost for Fairview of $1.5 million. Fairview capacity is 479 and serves about 648 students. The administration recommends putting $7 million aside from ESSER 3 capital funds for the Fairview building addition. If additional funds are needed, they would be raised by the school community. In addition, the administration is recommending that another item be brought forward by December 2022 for updates to additional schools on the north side of Milwaukee.
Does any member of our committee wish to make comments or ask questions? Dr. Taylor.
Thank you for that. My question was already answered by administration because being in the district, just looking forward to seeing the update from the schools on the north side in December. So thank you guys for thinking of that beforehand. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I just want to understand. So is this 7 million in addition to the 1.5 that was previously set aside, or is this 8.7 in addition to the 1.5?
Administration.
Director Peterson, President Peterson, Director O'Halloran, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The $8.7 million is the estimate for the cost of the addition, being 4 classrooms and a gymnasium. And we're recommending $7 million be put aside. $1.5 million was already approved by the board back in February for some of the facility updates that other schools received also. So the $7 million is in addition to the $1.5 million.
Thank you for that,
Sure. Okay.
thank you for that clarification. And I do want to point out that 38 is a lot, and the 6th grade class at Cooper currently has 46. And that is one class that gets shifted around, and they're making it work. And I'm not saying that that Fairview doesn't deserve this, but I think that understanding some of our enrollment patterns would be helpful with making some of these decisions, because I think some schools would benefit from a second look as well. And I'm glad that it's happening on the north side. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I'm happy to support this amendment.
Thank you. Other comments? Dr. Gokul Gandhi.
I would request that the administration also bring back, when you bring back the, potential totals for other schools, just a list, kind of to Director O'Halloran's point, of what the enrollment is looking like at our schools and what average class sizes are looking like, so we can get a comparison of just all the schools in total and make some informed decisions.
Administration, do you want?
President Peterson and members of the board, the administration will be happy to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from the committee? Yes, Director Herndon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too would like to know, because I met with some staff on last week with one of my high schools, and they're talking 40 students in a class or more, and that's just not effective as well. And so I'd like to see some report that would contain data for high schools in particular, because I would expect that 40 high school students or more in a class is far too many. Thank you.
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, we will be happy to get that to you. Actually, I will have the team working on that and hopefully have this to you prior to the full board meeting, just for your information.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Chair, before calling the roll on the motion, given that the amendment is allocating, let's see, another $8 million in addition to the 1.5, I think there needs to be some clarity, because it looks like this budget amendment is amending what is already allocated in the school and outlined in the budget to include an additional $8 million. So I understand what the conversation is, so I just want to provide some clarity in the motion. Given that the 1.5 is already allocated and included in the budget, the amendment would be to add an additional $7 million to the Fairview expansion.
Administration, is that your understanding as well?
Chair, or President Peterson, members of the board, Dr. Mann, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The amendment as provided, if we use the cost, would be $8.7 million. If we do the administration's recommendation, it would be $7 million. The 1.5 is separate and is not part of this.
But so the 1.5 is repairing other things in the school administration?
Correct.
President Peterson and members of the board, the idea with the 1.5 additionally was to do some things within the school. And the administration is looking at that 1.5 to be added with the 7 that we are recommending to be a grand total 8.5 towards that addition, because that addition will cover all the other issues pretty much that was created, has been created with the large enrollment at that particular campus.
Okay. Madam Secretary, is that clear?
Mr. Chair, so the budget amendment before you, if we're following Director Leonard's recommendation to approve the budget amendment, would allocate $8.7 million to Fairview. The administration is recommending $7 million. So I just wanted clarity from the administration and the author on what the board is going to be asked to vote on tonight.
So it's 7 million. The 1.5 has already been set aside. So if I'm understanding it correctly, we are really asking for $7 million more dollars to do the actual expansion. Do I understand that correctly?
Administration.
Chair Peterson, members of the committee, that is correct.
Mr. Chair, that changes the motion. So the motion is would not be, if I'm understanding the conversation, would not be to approve Director Leonard's budget amendment, but to approve the administration's recommendation relative to amendment number 13, which allocates another $7 million to the project.
Okay, so what I'll ask the maker of the amendment and a motion and the seconder to If you can withdraw what you did originally, and then we'll make that over again. Okay,
Yeah, I make a motion to withdraw that part of the amendment and then just go to it, do it the right way, I guess. Put the right numbers in there.
okay. And the second agrees? Yes. Okay, so why don't you make the motion again for 7 million?
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, I have the clarity. I have the motion adjusted to what the conversation is, which is to move approval of amendment number 13 as recommended by the administration for an additional $7 million to the Fairview expansion project.
Sounds good. Can you say ditto?
Ditto. Thank you.
Second, yes, and it's seconded by Director Taylor. Okay. Any further comments? Seeing, yes, Director Gokagandhi.
And I also just want to reiterate, it's really great that Director Leonard is going to bat for his schools, but I think this is what happens in the absence of a strategic plan that looks equitably across the district at enrollment patterns, at where kids are going to school. You know, we should have done this really last year when we were planning for ESSER, and it does feel a little bit frustrating that now at the end of the year, we're playing catch up to see what can or can't happen. And so I know we're going to talk about the strategic plan today, but I cannot stress the importance of having that plan in place sooner rather than later, because I don't want to be at a meeting where, you know, we're all sitting around saying, well, why didn't I go to bat for a school in my district to put an amendment forward today? That puts all of us sort of at odds, and it doesn't show sort of a united front and give each of our students sort of the attention that they deserve. So when you bring that report back, I just really hope that we can have a comprehensive understanding of what schools need what and how we can move forward with equity in mind.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Leonard's motion, seconded by Vice President Taylor, which moves approval of amendment number 13 as recommended by the administration for an additional $7 million to be allocated to the Fairview Building Expansion Project. On the motion as read into the record, Director Gokagandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Seamson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next amendment, please.
The next amendment is amendment number 14 by Director Taylor, and that is to allocate funding for necessary repairs at Rufus King High School.
Does Director Taylor wish to make any comments?
Thank you, President Peterson. First, I would like to move approval of this motion that's on the floor. And I probably need to correct it, but I'm going to move it first so that we can talk about it.
Here, amendment 14, you're moving. Yes. Okay, is there a second? Director Gokagandhi has seconded it?
Second?
Yes.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I visit my schools throughout the school year. Went to Rufus King, and the reason why I'm bringing this now, because it was something that was brought to my attention, but I was there to see it. And this is for some water damage as well as an elevator. The water damage, as we know, is great when you're drinking water. It's great for your body, but when it is within a foundation, it can move the foundation. There before us, if we don't be proactive rather than reactive, we'll be doing more work. So they are having some issues over there in some of the classrooms. I was able to see it, and I just think for the safety of our educators and the safety of our students, and hopefully to save us more money, that this should be addressed now. Also, they've been having some issues within this elevator. We had at least 4 or 5 students over there when I was there that was either on crutches or that was walking with a boot. The janitor did get stuck in the elevator for almost an hour, and so I take that to be a hazardous for public safety for all. So this is something that cannot wait. It needs to be addressed now. I see the recommendation that it seems to be in good standing, but being over there seeing this and hearing about some of the incidents, obviously they are in need of a different elevator or something to be done to it to upgrade it.
Thank you. Will administration please present this item?
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. Amendment number 14 is regarding repairs to walls and the elevator at Rufus King High School. The administration recommends that the board approve this item along with other schools that have elevators in higher needs of repair. Martha Kreisman will provide further information as well as the additional schools that we are recommending as with the price. Martha.
Thank you, Dr. Posley, Chair Peterson, members of the board, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The district has a deferred maintenance list. There are schools that have elevators rated in need of repair ahead of Rufus King on the deferred maintenance list. Therefore, the administration recommends adding these schools to the list of approved elevator repair replacements. The administration recommends putting aside $2.8 million to repair or replace the elevators at Rufus King, the Walker Building, Holmes, Gwen T. Jackson, Bruce, Brown Street, Douglas, and West Side Academy.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, how can we accompany, deal with this new development?
Mr. Chair, that would be an addition to the motion that the motion maker that before.
Director Taylor.
But if it's able to be done, I would like the other schools to be able to utilize and have something for their staff and students as well too. But that amendment is not before me, so.
Okay, so what you can do is withdraw your original amendment, okay, and then have the seconder withdraw it?
Yes, I would. So I'll go first. I'll withdraw this amendment while we're waiting on the new amendment to come through.
And
Withdraw my second.
thank you very much. Madam Secretary, can you suggest language for that, a new motion?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, administration. So, given that Director Taylor's amendment is for $500,000, is the new amendment for 2.8 inclusive of the entire $500,000 for Rufus King? Okay, and then I would just need a list of the schools.
Okay. Yes, Director Herndon.
In this discussion, I'm not hearing any additional information on the water damage. Is that separated out from the elevator repairs?
Let me ask the administration first. Administration?
President Peterson and members of the board, that is inclusive with the number. The amount is roughly $50,000 for the water damage.
Okay, so what is the new motion will include 2.8, it will include the water damage at King and King's elevator, plus elevator repair or replacement at the other schools, which, why don't you repeat those other schools slowly so we can get them into the motion?
President Peterson, members of the board, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The schools would be Rufus King, the Walker Building, Holmes, Gwen T. Jackson, Bruce, Brown Street, Douglas, and West Side Academy.
President Peterson and members of the board, if we could reflect Rufus King High School.
Do what, excuse me?
Rufus King High School, because we have Rufus King middle years as well, so Rufus King High School.
Yes, very good.
And can you make it West Side Academy 1, please? Thank you.
Okay, we're waiting for, Madam Secretary, for you. No rush, just.
Mr.
Madam
Chair,
Secretary.
I have the information. If there's additional discussion, you can continue, and then I'll read the motion into the record prior to the vote.
Very good. Director Gokul Gandhi.
So just to clarify, when we did the renovation for Douglas, what was included in that?
Administration.
President Peterson, Director Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, Sean Kane, Senior Director for Facilities and Maintenance Services. The renovation that we did at Douglas was some time ago, probably about a decade, and that, excuse me, included renovations that need to be done to accommodate the program that we had at the time. And, you know, there was a dual program that there was stuff that was done, but then also as well, not too long ago, that we also did the ceiling lighting and also painting. We did some restoration to a lot of the ceramic tile. There was a lot of stuff that was upgraded to get the building open. We placed whiteboards on chalkboards, so it was a lot of miscellaneous stuff to support the program that was moving into the school at the time.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Yeah, I want to support this amendment. I will just say publicly, I do not feel comfortable deciding on this on a whim's notice. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 8 schools. And I want more time to sit down and think and go back to my principals and ask. And so I just want to state that I am not in favor of moving forward with this addition at this point in time.
Okay. Other comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before there are additional comments, right now we have a motion to approve the original resolution the original budget amendment by Director Taylor, which was seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi for $500,000 for the Rufus King repairs and elevator.
Right.
The administration has made a request and the seconder has not agreed, so we are back at the original amendment.
Well, they would, my understanding is we withdrew that original amendment. So that's not the issue, but now we do need an amendment on the floor, so I'm going to ask Director Taylor to make such an amendment.
So I'm going to go back to my original motion because this is one of my schools. I don't even mind doing the second amendment, but I'm not going to do anything for something that I'm working with that's going to totally, I guess at this time, I'm challenged because I know this is needed at King. So I'm going to go back to my original amendment. I am okay with the other schools from administration, but at this point, then I believe it has to be 2 because I came here for Rufus King and due diligence. That is one of my schools, so I have to continue to advocate for that school at this minute.
So your motion is to,
Go back to the original motion.
okay,
The motion before the body is to move approval of amendment number 14, and that is a motion by Director Taylor. We would need a second to continue discussion.
okay, do I have a second? Director Simpson?
I'll second the motion.
So noted.
I just want to ask for clarification because from the administration. I believe you could tell us the origin of the list of needed repairs. That would be helpful because I think there might be some misunderstanding of those weren't just picked out of the sky, Go ahead.
President Peterson and members of the board, I will turn it over to Sean King afterwards, but basically what we're looking at, when we look at where Rufus King falls on the list, there are a number of schools that we gave you that needs a elevator replacement in the front of that particular school. So the administration is only bringing to the board the idea, if we do a new elevator in Rufus King, we need to address the issues of the schools that are been surpassed on the list to get to Rufus King. So and I'll turn it over to Sean Kane to kind of walk us through the order that we rate the elevators in.
Thanks, Dr. Posley. President Peterson, members of the board, Sean Kane, Senior Director for Facilities and Maintenance Services. So we have a deferred maintenance list, and as of this last fiscal year, it was approximately $265 million. And what we do is we take a look at about 40 components, and those components include elevators, roofing, windows, parking lots, tot lots, across the whole gambit. And when we take a look at that, we do site surveys, and currently right now our trades folks are actually out there doing surveys and assessments of what we consider those components of every building, what condition they're in. We have 4 criteria. There's poor, fair, good, and excellent. And where it gets to poor, it really needs to be replaced. And the items that, were brought forward, are discussed with the elevator that were put in poor condition that were just identified. That was just the elevators. I mean, that's not including boilers, that's not including roofs. Because when you look at the overall deferred maintenance list, I can point out a couple roof projects that are higher need where I'd understand that we do have elevators that require additional repairs here and there. If they do go down long-term, we obviously address them. But, then there's a lot of times people look at, do they want heat? Do they want roof not leaking on them? Do they want the water heater working, providing domestic hot water? So it's a big picture item. I mean, right now, that's where we come with this list. So our shop personnel goes through and takes a look at everything and addresses it. But in the scheme of things, what we're trying to also accomplish, especially with the ESSER funds related to air quality mechanical projects, we are trying to address those deferred maintenance items, in particular like testing and balancing, which is good that that's going to be addressed as part of that. If we got some mechanical units that we're able to do things, the bug screens along with the window systems, again, those are some components that we do address and take a look at. So in the grand scheme of things, the elevators aren't the only thing. It's about 40 components that we look up and down the list, do that assessment every year. It's a survey sheet, and it gets from, like I said, poor, fair, good, excellent. And right now, I believe when I looked at the last deferred maintenance list, there's about 550 items. And that includes, like I said, roofing, elevators, windows, boilers, et cetera. So that's kind of how that list is assessed. And once it goes into the poor condition, that's where we try to take in those utilizing construction 210 funds into consideration. The other thing that needs to be accounted for is that we have about $2 million of compliance and safety things that we have to do every year. That includes fire alarm testing, that includes suppression testing. From a compliance standpoint, we also silver coat our roofs to make them last longer, and that's $2 million alone every year, without even ESSER funds. So every time we look at our fiscal year, we have $2 million kind of set back that we always have to do that. And then we could start tackling the deferred maintenance items as the other projects. So that's kind of how the list is compiled.
So one more question. If the motion passes without this list, what kind of money would be available and when to repair the elevators in these schools? Is there a source of funds?
President Peterson, members of the board, Sean Kane, Senior Director, Facilities Maintenance Services. We take a look at each ranking that 550 projects that I'm talking about. The first, I want to say there's like 12 of them has to do with that compliance piece. Actually, it's about 16. Once you get past that, we take a look at that first one. And off the top of my head, I know it's a particular roofing system at one of our high schools that we rank them according, like this one's kind of getting to the point where it's on its last legs. So it could be a boiler, it could be a roof, could be an elevator. So it's not, we go in each component silo. We take a look at what's really the most pressing need. And then when we do get fiscal funds assigned to the construction 210 budget yearly, like I said, once we tap the first $2 million set aside, I mean, this last year also too, we had to dedicate funds to replace some vehicles in the fleet. And that was about $500,000. And also too, we look to use that we proved $250,000 through major remodeling unit that's out of 210 to do overdue space analysis study throughout the district to see how we're truly utilizing our classroom, especially for modern learning trends, et cetera. So with that all said, anything that goes beyond those type of, if we have some initiatives, that's where some, renovation costs come in. But that we call it major maintenance, the MM2, that's part of that 210. That's where we utilize those funds to start tackling deferred maintenance.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. I think it informed. Okay, Director Taylor.
All right, thank you, President Peterson. I feel like you asked the question and didn't answer. You were just asking, did we have funding for the rest of those projects? Was that correct? Is that the question that you were trying to get at? I just didn't hear yes or no. Like, was it funding available for these other projects or elevators? That's a yes or no, please.
Administration, do you want to just speak specifically to that?
President Peterson and members of the board, it's a yes and a no, because as Kane just talked about how we have to prioritize, anything could happen additional that we would bump up higher on the list. So therefore, there are monies set aside And we are not going to say that all of the elevators in which we talked about will get repaired. Maybe some of them will, and maybe some of them will not. So, but we're just trying to make sure that we get them all repaired, and that's the reason we brought it this way.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. So I am open to doing, I want to say two things, but absolutely just one thing. I want to go for it with my original amendment tonight. I am definitely open to bringing another amendment for these other schools, right? Because I want to look at the district as a whole and make sure. But I am going for it with my original amendment tonight. But I am definitely open, and I will sponsor another amendment for the other elevators. So.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Director Simpson.
So the schools that were listed, are those all of the schools that are in poor condition, or are there additional elevators that are in poor condition that aren't on this list?
Correct. Administration.
President Peterson, Director Simpson, Sean Kane, Senior Director for Facilities and Maintenance Services. The list that was provided, those are the ones that have been assessed currently in poor condition. That would satisfy that category at this point. Not to say, as we have the continue on surveys that are being completed towards the end of this year, and as we're pulling deferred maintenance costs for FY23, those, once we get to that point, there might be some on there, but that does currently tackle the current list now.
Follow-up?
On this and make sure that all of those schools get their elevators repaired, because no one wants to leave children or staff members sitting on an elevator for an hour. So thank you.
Okay. Yes, Director Taylor.
So I believe earlier, Dr. Mayer was saying that there will have to be another amendment drafted for that. Or I just want to make sure we have clarity too, right? Because I don't want to just go on with mine and keep talking about these other ones.
Madam Secretary, could you please let us know when it would be appropriate for such an amendment, to add to those schools and to repair their elevators?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, given that there is a requirement that all amendments are published prior to the board taking action, these would be the two amendments that could be addressed tonight. The opportunity to move some funding to address the other elevators could take place in a variety of ways. One would be to bring an item to the Accountability, Finance, and Personnel Committee meeting to use some of the funding that's already in the deferred maintenance allocation, or during the next budget cycle, there could be an amendment.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments or questions? Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, I guess the only question that I would ask is, what are we going to know different from tonight versus 2 weeks from now if we bring it back? It's the same situation. It's the same number of schools. So if we address it tonight, we'll have more time to do research, but the research has already been conducted, and we know that they are in poor condition. So I guess I'm confused on tonight versus 2 weeks from now.
Yes, so the question is the desire of the committee. My perspective is that the current motion is for the original amendment. My understanding, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Chair, is that, Madam Secretary, that people can amend an amendment at this point if they so desired, and nobody has done that. But, yes?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, you are correct. There was an attempt to have that conversation earlier, and the board members have expressed their feelings. Some of the board members have expressed their feelings about that. So now the amendment that is before you currently is the original amendment by Director Taylor, amendment number 14, which is to allocate $500,000 to the Rufus King High School repairs for water damage and repairs to the elevator.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there any other comment or from the committee, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I certainly want to attend to elevators that are in poor condition. My concern is that I wouldn't know that these 8 were on the list if Director Taylor hadn't brought forth this amendment. So it's hard to understand, given the myriad needs that we consider, where this falls within other priorities, facility needs. And so I am inclined to support the amendment as written, and I would love to hear more, a stronger plan or more detail, because when we said, is there funding? And then it was like, well, there's this need and we're doing this and that and the other. And it's just hard to hear that and take that information in and then say, yes, this is a great idea, because now I don't know with the other ones that were listed by the administration, should I be more concerned about these other ones? I don't know if that makes sense, but this was a limited amendment that was brought to us for consideration, and then scope creep happened, and suddenly we have more schools to consider, and I don't know what other needs are out there is my concern. So giving that 2 weeks, I understand that the elevators aren't going to repair themselves in the next 2 weeks, but it would be nice to know if there are other priorities that we should be considering. I'm also just wondering, when we say there's 2.4 million or whatever for these elevator, every time I put forward an amendment, I have to tell you where it's coming from. So what are we not funding if we're going to fund these 7? What's not getting done in that place? Or is it just we found the extra 2.4 million or whatever it is? So it's just, I just wanted to give that insight into why I would prefer to just go forward with the amendment as was originally presented, recognizing that I think administration has a valid point that in the next 2 weeks, the elevators will still be in poor repair and in need of attention. But I would like to know the entire picture and what the plans are, rather than just pull these 7 out of the air and fund them tonight.
Thank you. Administration, do you wish to comment?
President Peterson and members of the board, one of the things that we have is a process of how we provide funding for repair. And the administration is only bringing forward to you the idea, where the amendment was for a particular school. And that school ranks higher on the list. And our goal is to inform you that there's others that we are skipping past to do this. So, and that was the purpose, to rectify that situation so that we follow the plans that we have in place when it comes to elevator repair or installments. So that's our goal, is to let that information be known. If we had gone forward tonight with that and not shared that with you, that wouldn't be right either.
Right. Other comments? Director Simpson? Okay, Dr. Gokul Gandhi first.
Can you walk us through the process? So when we allocate it, you have, I think we did a facilities inventory, Mr. Kane, that you're talking about. I just want to understand the process when we were allocating dollars for deferred maintenance during ESSER 1, 2, and 3. What was sort of the triaging process of what we are going to fix and what we aren't going to fix? I think what feels misplaced about this is that just because an elevator amendment was coming forward, now we're talking about this. So it feels like a little bit we've missed the bigger picture of other needs in the district, and I just want to understand what was the deferred maintenance planning process like with our other ESSER funds.
Administration?
President Peterson, Director Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, Sean Kane, Senior Director, Facilities and Maintenance Services. So when we looked through, it was primarily ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. Facilities team was assigned $109 million to address, it was supposed to be surrounding mostly air quality, COVID-related things. Whereas ESSER 3, there was a little more flexibility. So when we looked at ESSER two, the biggest things that we discussed that we've been tackling have been testing and balancing, which is like a ventilation audit. We've been addressing any items off deferred maintenance. That would be mechanical units, that could be air handling units, they could be fan walls, unit ventilators, those components that you see in buildings. We also looked at constructing all these outdoor classrooms, and then also you have all these water bottle stations. And we also looked at temperature controls. Again, this gets back to the COVID-related issues with air quality, so we addressed those items in that capacity. So without, the $109 million, we took a look at all the sites, and at one point, we had about $87 million assigned in contract or project commitments to all the IPD, Integrated Project Delivery Contractors, the 4 teams that are working throughout the district. So you'd like the triage, you'd have to take a look at, okay, we have a site where we have, we did the testing and balancing. A lot of these mechanical units, we need to upgrade those, so be it. Bug screens. Some sites had bug screens, we didn't need to do anything. Some sites had more water bottle stations, so we didn't have to put as many up. Some sites had those outdoor classroom structures, so we gave them an allowance, to do some accessories or some minor upgrades to it. So we had to take a look at 150 sites and, do a full assessment, not only with us, but the IPD teams, but also our owner's representative, Concord Group, who's an extension kind of our workforce. So it was very labor intensive. We still meet once a week, looking at all projects, and then once it got to the point where we bid projects out, we noticed that some things were coming in way over bid. Some long lead time items, we're hearing 40 weeks to get something, so then we have to take a look if we had to scale some things back, because again, as we all know, we have 11 months with ESSER 2 and 1 year and 11 months to get ESSER 3 projects done. Now, that's talking ESSER 2. ESSER 3, that had a lot more flexibility. So, the discussion about elevators could be talked about. Additions, we're putting big addition on certain sites. Those are the things then, too, we were looking at ESSER 2, that if we had opportunities to, say, do a window system, a window replacement at one of the sites, that, hey, if we're already approaching from ESSER 2 to ESSER 3, we may wanted to purchase the material because it had a long lead time item for the window replacement piece. So we purchased the material in ESSER 2 and punted a project over to ESSER 3. Again, we're trying to be very tactical, very strategic about this. There's knowing the deadlines that we have. So when the discussion comes up, how do we look at deferred maintenance? We try taking a look at those items on that list if we can do it. Again, that $265 million, that's all poor. That's all poor condition stuff across all. There's no fair, there's no good in there. That's all poor. So I understand where, someone wants to take a look at the list, but again, those items that we looked at was one of the 40 components we had to do with the elevator. Again, there's boilers that we're trying to address and tackle with ESSER funds as part of the, the work that we're able to do. So hopefully we're able to drive some of that list down and, take care of those items. But the challenges are we're facing supply shortages. We're trying to get things done. So we don't want to, as everyone talks about, we don't want to leave money sitting on the table. So we're trying the best way to see, we're doing flooring projects. We're removing carpeting. I know that was a topic of discussion over the summer, trying to get material in hand. That's air quality stuff. So again, it's been a moving target. Has it been easy? Not at all, but we're trying our best to keep on top of things. So kind of getting to answer the question about ESSER 3 is a yes, no. Originally, we would refer to deferred maintenance, getting, construction 210 funds, but we don't get $265 million, and understandingly so. So that's where that money typically comes if we weren't even talking in an ESSER environment. But since we do have the opportunity within the ESSER environment, I believe those ESSER 3 funds could accommodate, those elevator projects that are considered in poor condition. Not sure if that answers that, but that's kind of how, we tried adjusting the deferred maintenance list.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Yeah, so I guess, could you provide like a ranked list of all of the deferred maintenance projects? And I just want to see comparatively to Director Halloran's point where the elevators fall in terms of the list that we currently have.
Administration, is that feasible?
President Peterson, Director Gokulgandhi, Sean Kane, Senior Director Facilities and Maintenance Services. Yes, we compile that list every year, and as part of our budget cycle, we work with finance to submit that. So yes, I have that very handily ready available.
Thank you. Director Simpson.
So, right, this is really a complicated conversation, which goes back to like strategic planning, priority-based budget, when we all kind of come at things from our own perspective and we put forth budget amendments, it just creates a lot of confusion, because there isn't an organized system. aren't able to talk to each other, so we don't know what somebody else is thinking of. So although the Roof is King elevator needs replacing, I can understand that putting forth this amendment, doesn't seem fair then to a school that has an elevator in worse condition. So it's like, I want to improve the Roof is King elevator, but I also feel bad about, having them jump over an elevator system that's in worse, condition, and then jumping those projects ahead of one that's in a more critical condition. So in terms of making a decision tonight, this all just seems really convoluted and unnecessarily difficult.
President Peterson and members of the board, do we have to make this decision tonight? No, but the idea of the supply chain, we want to make sure that we get in line if we're talking about ESSER dollars with a limited time to spend those dollars.
Thank you. Director Herndon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would support us putting this on the AFP committee's agenda for next month because it's only a couple weeks away, and that would give us time to obtain clarity for each and every one. That would be my suggestion because I'm not making a motion in that we already have one on the floor.
Thank you. Any other comments from Dr. Taylor?
Thank you. Okay, I'm still on. So I am every bit of listening to everybody talk, right? And so we all had the opportunity, I get it, to make amendments. And so as I sit here and I absolutely respect each one of my colleagues, we just passed $7 million for expansion. We talked about it for maybe 5 minutes because we all have several schools that needed an expanded, right? And then I bring an amendment because someone actually got stuck in this elevator, right? A safety issue that just happened not even 4 days ago, right? And so I look at it and I think of $300,000 versus $7 million, and this is nothing against Director Leonard. I'm grateful for that. That's why I second it. But we spend the last 30 or 45 minutes going back and forth with someone else's safety in this elevator that just happened very recently that they brought, and to me, without a whim, we passed $7 million. And they two different things, but just as I sit here and we think about what are we going to do, and this isn't to get anyone to vote up or down because I feel like everyone knows what they're going to vote, but I just want us to really look and think about some of the things that we do within this board when we talk about equitable, and everybody had the right to bring it. I am still open to the other elevators, but I can't sit here and not push forward when I was just at a school listening to the students and the educators talk about this elevator and this water damage. And I didn't want to say it in public, right? But I'm just going to say it. The freaking water damage, the walls were crumbling while our babies was up in this classroom. They had posters covering the walls in different stands. So I cannot advocately sit here on the school board and say that I'm okay with this. Now, everyone can vote for wherever they want to vote for, but this is going forward tonight. AFP, I am more than happy to bring the other 7 forward, but I am going forward tonight with this King one, and everybody has the right to either vote it up or vote it down.
Thank you. Other comments? Director O'Halloran.
I also just want to point out that King is one of our flagship schools, and there are roughly 1,400 students in that building and the number of staff. So when we're talking about prioritizing elevators, we should also consider repairing this would be a significant improvement for a lot of our students. So when we talk about prioritizing some of our work, I think it's also, it should be a consideration that we're taking care of, I don't know, investing here would provide a lot of return. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Seeing no comments, any further comments? Madam Secretary, could please call the roll.
On Director Taylor's motion, seconded by Director Simpson, which moves approval of amendment number 14 as presented. On the motion as read into the record, Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, the motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. What's the next item?
Mr. Chair, we are back to item number 1. Item number 1 is action I'm sorry, one quick moment. Item number 1 is action on the request to approve the 2022-23 proposed fall budget adjustments to the adopted FY23 budget. The recommendation is that the board adopt the fall budget changes, including ESSER, as proposed, and that the annual budgetary resolutions be adopted as indicated in the attachment number 2 to this item.
Thank you. Will the administration please present the item?
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. We are here to present the fall adjustments of the board to the board adopted spring budget and update you on the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund. The budget process in the spring and fall provides opportunities to review districts' budgets to make sure each school has the level of supports needed. A team of staff reviews each school budget. For the fall budget, an addition of $1.5 million was set aside for supplemental school support, providing a total of $5.9 million in school stand-up funds. Nearly 94% of the budget is used in direct support to schools. There are many after-school activities that take place in the Milwaukee Public Schools. These after-school programs enhance students' education, help parents, and strengthen the community. To support these programs, we need to ensure the safety of students, participants, and staff. Part of the proposed changes to the budget includes funding for additional safety hours to support school safety, and also the safety as far as the Milwaukee Public Schools after-school patrol. Some additional positions have been added to enhance the capacity and quality of work and to decrease risk to the district. These positions includes a project manager in facilities and maintenance who will assist with the construction projects. Additional positions include accounting support and for facilities projects, accounting support for grants claiming and finance, and a coordinator of procurement in the risk management department for conducting contract development. Additional tax levies for the extension fund will support additions, adding a community recreation center in the near future. Added to the ESSER capital projects are repairs to the greenhouse at Craig Montessori School, divider walls in the gymnasium at Milwaukee School of Languages. Here this evening with me is the Financial Planning and Budgeted Services team, as well as the Department of State and Federal Programs teams to provide an update. I will turn it over now to Brian Terrell, Interim Director of Financial Planning and Budget Services. Brian.
President Peterson and members of the board, I am Brian Terrell, Interim Director of Financial Planning and Budget Services. I will be summarizing the proposed changes to the adopted budget. As a result of declining enrollment, school accounts have decreased by $9.2 million in total. This includes decreases to our MPS traditional, charter, alternative, and partnership schools, as well as decreases to the school's specialized services account as a result of enrollment adjustments. These losses, as Dr. Posley stated, are partially offset by a $1.5 million increase to the supplemental school support account for schools in need. In office accounts, the majority of the $214,000 increase is a $132,000 increase in finance to cover an additional procurement and risk management coordinator position. Other accounts are increased by $13.2 million, which represents an increase in the reserve for pay increases and a reduction of the vacancy adjustment. The construction fund will have an increase in revenue of $700,000 as a result of the rent revenues that NPS has received. This revenue will be allocated to capital maintenance and infrastructure repairs. The nutrition fund shows a $6.5 million decrease in revenue on attachment 1. However, this is not a true decrease as funding is allocated in ESSER for nutrition services. In the spring, we did not include ESSER funding in our categorical totals of the budget. We are displaying those totals in the budget presented before you today. The Extension Fund is increasing its tax levy by $5 million to enable the construction of a recreation wellness center that is in the planning stages of development. Overall, excluding the addition of the ESSER funding to the amended budget, the change from the spring budget to now was only $2.5 million or 0.19%, which shows that the district's early estimates were nearly accurate when compared to the actual funding received. Please note the amounts before you in attachment 1 does not include the amendments that were just approved. At this time, I will now turn the mic over to Shelley Perkins, who will provide an update on ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 spending. Once Ms. Perkins concludes her presentation, we will be available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Brian. Director Peterson, members of the board, my name is Shelley Perkins, Director of State and Federal Programs, Underfield. I'm excited to have the opportunity to provide you with updates on our activities related to ESSER 2 and 3. The purpose of this presentation is to share the current program progress, expenditures, commitments, and remaining balances of ESSER 2 and 3 budgets approved by the Milwaukee Board of School Directors on May 27, 2021 for ESSER 2, October 14, 2021 for ESSER 3, and May 24, 2022 for ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 combined. The Fall 2022 Budget Revision Detail, which is attachment 4, reflects actual expenditures and commitments from grant inception through June 30th, 2022. The format of the Fall 2022 Budget Revision Detail is a combination of both ESSER 2 and 3 budget summary books for a streamlined review of ESSER 2 and 3 allocations under each funding priority committee: accelerating learning, health and wellness, facilities, technology, and extracurricular engagement. This book is formatted by each committee detailing the accomplishments through June 30th, 2022. Current and planned activities, budget revisions, and priority line item details. In order to enhance readability of the report, line items falling into a single category have been consolidated to better reflect the administration's activity related to the same cost objective, reflect implementation needs, and the green highlighted budget line items are new activity program requests for approval. The new budget line items were determined by need and supported by unspent funds from previously approved line items. With the proposed revision, the district demonstrates our unwavering commitment to closing the achievement gap and exceeds the required 20% reservation of ESSER 3 funds to support mitigating learning loss indicated by the gold highlighted numbers shown in the ESSER 3 priority detail. As we look at the 5 priorities for success, ESSER is a critical component across all 5 areas. Tonight's presentation, along with stakeholder engagement, is aligned to the strategic plan as we are working on fiscal responsibility and transparency as we provide an overview of the spending as of June 30th, 2022, as well as upcoming implementation plans. ESSER 2, as of to date, 81% is obligated with just under $52 million of expenditures and over $130 million in encumbrances. Unrealized salary and wage expenditures for planned programmatic activity already approved and underway will be supported by the remaining balance. Next slide. Stay there. The chart shows the fall 2022 ESSER II budget summary. As a reminder, just under $225 million were allocated to Milwaukee Public Schools under ESSER II. Nearly $126 million, which is 56% of the award, has been obligated as of June 30th, 2022, and the committee's report will further detail accomplishment related to the obligation, as well as current and future plans for the remaining balance. As of today, 81% has been obligated in ESSER II. Just remember that the book is showing you as of June 30th. Accelerated Learning had nearly $19 million in expenditures, reflecting major efforts to direct services to students, investments in staff development, and procurement of high-quality materials. The Accelerating Learning Committee report, starting on page 3, highlights over 100 lines of effort prioritized for action. Health and Wellness Committee's report starts on page 12, with additional detail on priority progress in focus areas such as COVID-19, risk mitigation measures, and social-emotional learning programming. ESSER I funds were exhausted first to address the emergent response for the district. While progress has been underway, the board can expect a major increase in spend at the next ESSER update for health and wellness as lines of effort ramp up. In ESSER III, actual costs exceeded the allocation for emergency paid sick leave as noted on page 16. The actual expenditures more than tripled the allocation. This budget revision reflects an increase in costs with a sum sufficient to cover FY22 costs. We will inform you specifically where we are at with this item during the next ESSER update. The facilities report begins on page 19 with a snapshot of progress status at June 30th, with over $10 million spent in ESSER II. The majority of ESSER II projects are related to air quality. Board members can look forward to updates on renovations, remodeling, construction, and capital projects such as the Reagan Addition and outdoor classrooms throughout the school district. Next slide. President Peterson and members of the board, you will recall in prior presentations that many of the lines of effort under accelerated learning, health and wellness, and facilities were able to be continued with the third stimulus package under ESSER III. As a reminder, 2 additional priority areas, technology and extracurricular engagement, were added when developing the ESSER III plan. 63% of the technology allocation has been obligated with over $17 million spending, putting over 50,000 Chromebooks and accessories in the hands of students. The Extracurricular Engagement Committee report begins on page 25. Just under $35 million was allotted to athletic priorities, and the administration anticipates that a major progress update will be available at the next ESSER update related to athletics facilities upgrades. To date, over 85 schools have been allotted funds to expand after-school clubs across MPS. Under the American Rescue Plan Act, districts must reserve 20% of their ESSER 3 award to mitigate learning loss. These figures are highlighted in gold on the slide before you. Next slide. MPS is required to budget 20% or $101 million to go towards mitigating learning loss. As you can see in the slide, MPS beat the minimum reservation required with an additional $30 million allocated to projects that mitigate learning loss. Next slide. New items brought to the board in the fall 2022 budget are summarized here. Administration is requesting budget authority approximating $8.8 million in ESSER 2 and $4.5 million in ESSER 3. These new items are supported by unspent balances from previously approved line items. Next slide. The online version of the Spring 2022 ESSER 2 and 3 proposed budget revision detail is posted on the district's ESSER web page at the address listed below. For more information about the budget revision detail, please contact MPS Office of Finance at the number listed, or you can email us at the email address listed. This concludes my presentation, and we can answer any questions that you may have.
Ask any questions? Dr. O'Halloran.
Thank you. I was curious to hear more about the $5 million in the extension fund, what the plan was for either location or like timeline, if we have any details on that.
Administration, the $5 million from the Wellness Center.
President Peterson, members of the board, my name is Brian Terrell, Interim Director of Financial Planning and Budget Services. This project is still in the very early stages of planning. There have been some sites flown around in preliminary discussions, but nothing has been set in stone yet to my knowledge.
President Peterson and members of the board, Lynn Grabs is here with us and can give us some preliminary thoughts around that. Lynn, if you would come to the mic, please, and kind of walk through the plans and what you're looking at.
Good evening, President Peterson, members of the board, Director O'Halloran. Thank you for the question. We have been working on this particular project for several years now. It initially came out of our work around accreditation, and we had to do a feasibility study. Oh, I'm sorry, and my name is Lynn Greb, Director of Recreation. We were required to do a feasibility study, and we selected exploration of a community center on the north side of Milwaukee due to the fact that, as you know, we have the Beulah Britton Community Center on the south side, and the intent when that was first constructed was to build roughly, I think, 8 of those throughout the city of Milwaukee, and as you know, that was kind of a one and done. And so when we did the feasibility study, we had looked at probably about 8 locations throughout the north side. We did have a region that we were really focused on. But at the end, it was narrowed down to a couple of locations, and right now we were looking at the space just west of Obama High School. There's old driver's ed parking lot in that area, and the footage that surrounds that area is would be feasible to the construction of this standalone community center. When we did the feasibility study, we also did a survey of the neighborhood, north side area, and overwhelmingly, we found support for the concept as well as the location that was identified. So I can go into further detail if you'd like, if you have more questions.
Follow-up?
Just wondering about timeline. So if we approve it today and then we levy for it, like, you know, when is community engagement, or like, would it be shovels in the ground spring? Like, just trying to understand what the timeline would be.
Administration?
Thank you, Chair Peterson, President Peterson, Lynn Greb, Director of Recreation, members of the committee, and Director O'Halloran. We have a little bit more funding to secure for the entire project, but if we can shore that up soon, then we were looking to have the design work done in 2023 and hopefully groundbreaking in '24.
Any follow-up?
Just since I have you here, I would also love to hear plans longer term about a potential skate park, which got killed in my district because the neighbors did not love the park that was selected, but longer term, I'm just going to use this opportunity to say that's something that the city, we did prove the concept that it is overwhelmingly very much supported, and the city of Milwaukee doesn't have a skate park. And so if there were potential, whether it's here, there, or anywhere within the footprint of Milwaukee, I would love to hear plans for that longer term.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee members? Mr. Leonard.
So I just wanted some clarity on is that a permanent increase in the tax levy, or is that a one-time increase?
Administration.
Director Leonard, President Peterson, members of the board, it is not a one-time thing. It is a plan to keep levying that extra $5 million and moving forward.
Okay, Dr. Taylor.
Chair Peterson. Y'all talked about the extracurricular schools, but I know we didn't go into detail, so I'll ask some of it now and ask other questions outside of this. Are we looking to expand more other programs, or are we looking to like just incorporate them in what we're doing with the Twilight schools or Twilight centers?
Administration.
President Peterson, members of the board, and Director Taylor, just to clarify, your question is in reference to the community center concept?
Yes.
And expansion of programming?
Yes.
So I think, the intent, first of all, I want to say that the arrangement that we have with Milwaukee Public Schools to use school facilities for programming is the best concept I can even imagine. But I think we've found the value of having a standalone center as well of what we have at Beulah Britton right now, that we would love to have that same opportunity on the north side to do programming during the day, particularly for seniors. We have no daily programming for senior adults on the north side. We have the Oasis Center, and then we have the Beulah Britton Center. So certainly the expansion for serving that population during the day, as well as just the swimming pool concept. I think many board members know the challenges that we have with our pool infrastructure, and we are working on that with the ESSER funding, so we will be able to make better progress on just the mechanicals of our current pools, but having a dedicated swimming pool 24/7. One of the things in our community-wide needs assessment when we were doing accreditation came back, swimming was the _1 rated activity from the community of what they want to see more of. If we had a dedicated pool, upgraded, brand-new pool to teach young people to swim, and just, I think that could be programmed extensively. So the idea is to expand programming, not take away from what we already offer in our community centers within the school facilities, but it would just give us more chances to program during the day, on Saturday, on Sunday. We have a tight gym space is like at a premium for everything we do now. We could benefit, we could run more if we had, dedicated facility for that.
Any follow-up, Dr. Taylor?
No, thank you for that. I think it's a great idea.
Dr. Simpson.
Just a comment. So I'm thrilled that that this plan is in the works, and that will be a welcome resource on the north side of town. I'm glad to hear it's going to be there. And I volunteered with a walking group through the Milwaukee Public Library, and they had a small little group that was on the north side, and they were dedicated walkers every day, and they are moving into like a chair yoga thing, but right, it's during the day. seniors, people who are retired, looking to stay active. There was a gentleman who had moved here from, I forget where, and he was just thrilled to find some programming options for seniors during the day. So it's definitely a needed resource. I'm really happy to hear that you're keeping that age group in mind and when you're planning this. So thank you.
Other comments or questions? Okay, Director Simpson.
I went not for Lynn Greb, but this is just on page, I think this is attachment number 4 on page, 13. There was just a request for a budget revision where it said the Health and Wellness Committee is requesting a portion of the funding originally allotted for social emotional learning programming be reallocated for more assessment kits and compensatory special education services for students. I was wondering if someone could just speak a little bit more to that or expand on that.
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, Travis Pinter is on his way to the mic to kind of talk about that because we have leads for each of the 5 areas. So Travis is the one for health and wellness. Travis.
President Peterson, members of the board, regarding the that shift had to do with both what we sort of under-predicted what we were going to need in terms of assessments and then sort of over-predicted for the SEL piece. So that SEL piece was out. The reduction was, if you recall, there was an amount that was going out to all schools, and they have discretionary funding, which they still have. But the board at one point made a decision to put, I believe it's $100,000 per school to spend on a variety of things, and some of that included SEL, and so that money, some of that money came from there and in a sense was reduced for that reason, but that was the decision made by the committee when we talked about it.
Director Simpson.
Yeah, and then, okay, so I understand that, and then just, could you just explain, like, the assessment kits, the other services that you're looking to put that money towards?
Sure. President Peterson, members of the board, Travis Pinter, Senior Director of Specialized Services. The increase was due to, in that particular part about assessments, was due to coming back from the pandemic and having an increased need in sort of testing of students and in assessing for students and also for compensatory services depending for students. So we're sort of building up test kits and also expanding our test kits to broaden them depending on the needs we were encountering. So that was really for across, that goes across our school psychologists, our social workers, our speech pathologists, and our occupational and physical therapists. So there was increased need that kind of came off the pandemic that we anticipated and we're spending on.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Welcome.
Other comments or questions by the committee? Seeing none, Madam Chair, what do we need to do in order to move forward?
Mr. Chair, the item is before the board relative to action on the request to approve the 22-23 proposed budget with the adjustments for the FY23 budget and also the annual budgetary resolutions to be adopted as outlined in attachment number 2 to this item.
Okay, so first we'll do with the number 1, which is
Mr. Chair, it is one complete item. You would be adopting the budget,
all at the
including
same.
ESSER, which is reflective of the levies and the budget resolutions.
Okay, I need a motion. Director Simpson.
I move that we adopt administration's recommendations regarding the fall budget changes, including ESSER as proposed, and that the annual budgetary resolutions be adopted as indicated in attachment 2 to this item.
Excellent. Do I have a second? Director Herndon.
Second.
Fine. Any further discussion on the part of the committee? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, could you please call the roll?
On Director Simpson's motion, seconded by Director Herndon, and that is to, that the board adopt the fall budget changes, including ESSER, as proposed, and the annual budgetary resolutions as follows. Relative to the School Operations Fund, resolved that pursuant to the provisions of Section 119.46 Wisconsin statutes relating to the School Operations Fund, the Board of School Directors hereby advises the Common Council that the amount of $1,094,414,841 will be required for the operations of the Milwaukee Public Schools, for the repair and keeping in order of school buildings and equipment, and the making of material improvements to school property during the 2023 fiscal year. In addition, pursuant to action taken by the Board of School Directors at its regular meeting of September 22nd, 2011, the Board of School Directors is required to advise the Common Council that $11,485,966 will be required for the operations of the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, and that $272,128,383 will be required for the operations of the Milwaukee Public Schools, and that a total of $283,614,349 thereof is to be raised by a tax levy on all real and personal property in the city of Milwaukee, subject to taxation for the Milwaukee Public School purposes in 2023, pursuant to the provisions of Section 65.07, Parent 1, Parent E, Wisconsin statutes. Said amount to be raised by tax levy being in addition to money to be received from state aids, shared taxes, and from other miscellaneous sources. And that is the School Operations Fund. Relative to the Extension Fund, resolved that pursuant to the provisions of Section 119.47 Wisconsin statutes relating to the Extension Fund, the Board of School Directors hereby advises the Common Council that the amount of $42,339,247 will be required for the maintenance of playgrounds, recreation centers, and similar activities during the 2023 fiscal year, and that $34,725,000 thereof is to be raised by a tax levy on all real and personal property in the city of Milwaukee, subject to taxation for the Milwaukee Public School purposes in 2023, pursuant to the provisions of Section 65.07, Parent 1, Parent G, Wisconsin statutes, said amount being required in addition to other miscellaneous funds. Relative to the Construction Fund, which requires a 2/3 majority vote, resolved that pursuant to the provisions of Section 119.48 Wisconsin statutes, the Board of School Directors hereby advises the Common Council that the amount of $3,642,559 will be required for the 2023 fiscal year construction fund budget purposes, and that it is to be provided in accordance with Section 65.07, Parent 1, Parent F of Wisconsin statutes, and $1,816,630 by a tax levy on all real and personal property in the city of Milwaukee, subject to taxation for the Milwaukee Public Schools purposes in 2023, and said amount to be in addition to the money received from other miscellaneous sources.
Thank you very much.
On the resolution as read into the record, including approval of the budget, inclusive of all ESSER funds, and the amounts listed in the resolution. Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Seamson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, the motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what's the next item?
Mr. Chair, we are at item number 3, which is a board retreat on strategic planning and budget timeline and process to provide an update. No board action will be taken on these items other than information sharing. Although this retreat is taking place during a public meeting as is customary, there is no public participation at board retreats.
Thank you. At this time, the board will commence with its retreat. Just as a reminder, the board may end its retreat at any time but must end by 8 p.m. The item to be considered during this retreat and publicly noticed is an update on the work of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Budget. Will the administration please present the item?
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. We are happy to be here with you this evening to share our progress with you on the development of a strategic plan. Also to engage in a conversation that will provide meaningful feedback and input as we move forward. At this time, I will ask Dr. Melanie Stewart to provide information, and after which we'll be happy to entertain any questions you may have. Dr. Stewart.
Data for the district. To begin, as always, with our 5 priorities of success, and because we are talking about strategic planning, all 5 of the priorities are being addressed throughout this process. We began back in a year ago with a resolution that was approved by you, the Board of Directors, and these were some of the items that were asked to be included in the strategic planning. We always want to also begin with our MPS mission. We keep this as a focal point, and we believe that the 5 priorities of success are what bring us and lead us to this mission, that Milwaukee Public Schools is a diverse district that welcomes all students and prepares them for success in higher education, post-educational opportunities, work, and citizenship. We have chosen to use the Baldrige framework to help us guide this process so that we are looking at means of excellence as we evaluate our district compared to others. So an update on the work. When we met last at the board retreat, we began looking at one of the sections of data on academics primarily. We have continued the data collection not only on the student learning and process results, but we have collected data across these other areas: student and other customer results, workforce results, leadership and governance results, budgetary, financial, market, and strategy results. Those have all been reviewed, and we have also asked the question, what data don't we have? While we are rich in data, we also have become aware there are some data points that we do not have. Additionally, we began at our last session together looking at possible questions. We have been doing this in all of the areas listed above. What are the things that we don't know that we need to know, that we want to know from our various stakeholder groups, which include staff, families, students, and the community? One of the things we have talked about also is how do we get support for engaging all of our stakeholders. We will be working with one of the research teams at the University of Wisconsin with the formalization of our questions in each of these categories. We have worked with this team previously, and they have successfully served as the administrator of surveys to our staff and students. This has been able to provide and assure confidentiality in collecting information from these groups. Our students and staff are assured and are very familiar with this group so that they know that they can speak freely when being surveyed. We are also working with the Department of Strategic Partnerships and Customer Services so we can meet the needs of their annual family survey, which is required by the Department of Public Instruction. Additionally, we are working with the Communications Department to assure their survey needs are met to continue their work that they are working in that department. To ensure engagement, we are asking each of you to identify a champion in your district that can partner with us as we hold community engagement events after the first of the year. We believe that this would be someone that you believe understands your district and how to engage your family and your community. We expect to use mixed methods of virtual and in-person events, online surveys, paper surveys, in a range of languages. We will also work with our communications team to assure that there is a lot of publicity, multimedia distribution of those as well. Additionally, I wanted to share with you tonight, and there were two additional attachments on this item. We often talk about our school improvement planning, and we talk about our district improvement planning. What I wanted to do is to bring this in the hierarchy of how this fits into the strategic plan. Both the district and the school improvement planning is based on a plan, do, study, act methodology of planning. We do this in collaboration with our families, with stakeholders, with our buildings, with staff members. We also do this with the Department of Public Instruction. The data that we are using is some of the same data that you have seen. We are also working together because of many of our schools that have identification under ESSA. There are things and data that we must attend to in all of these plans because of state and federal accountability. In the plan that we have provided for you, and I'm going to stop my presentation so that I can bring that up for a moment, is that in our district improvement plan, as you can see, this is guided by our district mission. We can see that we have 3 key goals: an academic goal, a cultivating culture and climate goal, and a human resources goal. We look at the strategies that have been identified. Each of these are evidence-based strategies that research has proven has impact when implemented with fidelity. Each of these sections also has action steps. These action steps are not for the full year. These are action steps for approximately the first semester. You can see the wide range of people and departments that are integrated into this. We also look at the evidence of completion, both in quality and fidelity, that we expect to collect and be able to share to demonstrate that we have made progress. We also have included in each of these areas what we believe are the driving forces and the restraining forces. Think of those as some of our root cause analysis and looking at barriers so that we are certain that we are attending to these. As you can read, a variety of the items that we have included on here are highly strategic, based on data, moving forward, and in collaboration with many departments in the district as well as the Department of Public Instruction. Additional in your packet this evening was a document that is the continuous improvement process, criteria, and rubric. As we work with the Department of Public Instruction, we are also required to be evaluated, and they are reviewing not only our district plan, but all of our, but they also help support us in reviewing all of the school improvement plans and making certain that we are meeting these criteria. This is also criteria for our comprehensive support and improvement schools to edge towards exiting. So the Department of Public Instruction provides input for us and for our schools so they can continue, because one of the criteria to exit as a CSI school is to demonstrate that they have included and have sustained improvement processes. So at this time, I will end my presentation and open it up to you for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Administration. I will ask for any questions or comments from our committee and then allow everybody to speak at least once before somebody speaks twice. Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. So you mentioned, or administration mentioned, identifying a community kind of liaison who would be able to rally the troops, so to speak, to provide input. So I was wondering how we should get those suggestions to administration, what the deadline would be, and what the expectation is for that community input process throughout the spring.
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, we would request that it goes through the board clerk, through Dr. Mann, and she could forward that information on to us.
Follow-up?
And then the timeline and expectation for if somebody were to step up and say, I'm going to be the champion for the district, like how often are we speaking, or is this a one meeting and done, or is it an ongoing expectation, recognizing like Bayview can be very different from Clayton Crest, like there's different communities within each district. So just trying to understand what that process and expectation is.
Administration.
Thank you. Melanie Stewart, Director of Research Assessment and Data, Director Peterson, Director O'Halloran, members of the committee. I think we are looking to be as strategic as possible, that we would have key events, 1 to 2 events in your district, depending upon your district, and working with you as well. I think we want to keep this fairly short term, so that we can provide something potentially in person as well as virtual. And as we know, Wisconsin winters are what they are, so we want to also take that into consideration for the safety of people. The surveys would also go out in a variety of other forms. So there is like the specialty of meeting the needs of your district, but there is also the universal delivery of the surveys. Staff and student surveys would be done with our university partner, very similar to how we've done the essentials of school climate and culture survey, where we can monitor the progress of how many people are responding, how many students are responding, et cetera. So that's right now what we're looking at, to look at January, February, to have all the data collection done, and that goes along with our timeline so that we can get the analysis done and the data back to you in March, April.
Thank you. Dr. Gokul-Gandhi.
This isn't really a question so much as just a statement, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on it. So, as I look at this plan, like, this is a lot, and if I were to be a parent or a teacher or someone in this district, I'd look at this and say, okay, what about math, reading, and graduation rates, right? Like, that should be the bread and butter in terms of, and I'm talking about like academics right now, so this is just one section. And I just would love to see like something as simple as that, right? Like, how are we going to improve math? How are we going to improve reading? And how are we going to graduate more kids? And because this should be something that anybody in our community can pull up and say, oh, this is what MPS is doing to improve math, reading, and graduation rates. And frankly, like, as we move forward with our committees, that's all I want to talk about in SASE is math, reading, and I want it to be very clear to the community that those are the 3 things for the next 5 years that all of us are talking about, that all of us are asking about. And I feel like in my experience in the last year that it gets very convoluted because our plan doesn't allow for just focus on 3 things that really move metrics. And we have programs in the district, right? Like the Milwaukee Math Partnership. We know that boosted children and got them to better reading and better early outcomes. And so yes, okay, that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
What can?
Yeah, it's your administration.
Director Peterson, Director Gokul-Gandhi, Melanie Stewart, Director of Research Assessment and Data. We can work on the clarity because those are the core of this. If you look at strategy 1 with the adult professional learning, that's explicit instruction, accelerating learning that you've been hearing about and learning about. And that is very much aligned to explicit instruction in reading, language arts, and mathematics. It is the formative practice of how do we know how students are doing in each of those areas, and the third lever of engagement with how do we make certain that our students are engaged in the instruction. Strategy 2 is about our graduation rate. And as you look, one of our biggest things that we need to look at is the minimization of failures at the high school, which is how do we help students succeed to mitigate that we do not have to have credit recovery, but we are supporting staff and students to be able to be successful. We're also looking at things to make certain that students are getting all of the courses that they need. We often find that we have students that we need to make certain have their graduation requirements so that they are not getting into their senior year or last semester and missing a half a credit. And so we are needing to make certain that that is occurring as well. So there's a variety of things here. Also our support staff. How are we supporting our teachers in doing this work, that everyone knows what grade level expectations are so that we can be hitting the mark at grade level and making certain that we're targeting every student towards their grade level expectations. So thank you very much, and that's where we're headed.
President Peterson and members of the board, but I also want to add that there's a number of different other things that we have to control for. The DPI acts that we control for, just a number of different things, you know, that of higher importance. If we don't have children in school, we don't have either one of these three. So therefore, you know, we want to bill it under these three tenets and go from there, but there's a number of other things that you will read throughout the documents that we have to address as well, you know, with parents and just a number of different things that funding that we receive that's tied to that we have to be accountable for. And we want this to be the true measuring stick of what we do within the district. And you talk about the arts, you know, art, music, physical education, library, media specialists, all of those kinds of things, they fall under these tenets, but we have to spell those things out as well.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Yeah, just, and I know that it's not as simple as that and that there's a lot of nuance and we're expected to do a lot of things. I just think oftentimes this is so jargony, like, you know, it just is, in terms of a community-facing document, if some, and obviously number 2 says improve graduation rates, so I would be able to understand that. But the first one, I don't know that if I didn't sit on this board or have you here explaining it to me, I could understand it. And so I think we need an internal document, obviously, that everybody here sort of in the bubble gets, but we need an external document that crystal clear explains to the community that we want to get your kids to school. We want them to learn how to read. We want them to learn how to add. And then we want to send them off to be successful, right? And so how are we articulating that plain and simple? And how can somebody pick that PDF up and say, oh yeah, I could tell you the 4 things MPS is doing to graduate my child. So.
Thank you. Director Herndon had her hand up. We'll go first to her.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The items that seem to concern me the most are not in here at all. And what I mean by that is academically, we all want the kids to read, write, and do mathematics. However, that's impacted by whether or not a student is in school and the behaviors that go on within the building. And we would, for my part, be remiss if we did not make that an issue. That is the elephant in the room that we really, for me, cannot ignore any longer. I think that it heavily impacts the students' performance. If they aren't in the seat in the classroom, they cannot learn. If the behaviors are so bad within the classroom or the building, they cannot learn. And for me, that is just simply something that we must attack. Otherwise, this is not going to be as effective as we all would like to see it.
Thank you. Any comment from administration?
Yes, thank you, Director Peterson. We want to also point towards the section on cultivating culture and climate. This is where behavior, attendance under the multi-tiered systems of support is addressed exactly as you have described it. This also is where we have our family and community engagement component, which is critical. That is a required component, and not just reporting out. It's how do we engage families? And we know that that is one of the things with our schools, is that we really need to be, that needs to be two-way and interactive, not just sending out a newsletter. So that is very important. Also, we're looking at facilities and environment, which was talked about earlier this evening, and how does that come into play, and how do we look at some of the projects we've done and the impacts that it has had on all of the academic components. So those are some of the things that are included in this as well.
Any follow-up? No. Dr. Taylor?
President Peterson, I thank you because you addressed what my concerns was, like the community and the family aspect of it. Our classrooms are a direct result of the city we live in. And I know we talk about it all the time, and within NPS, we're only able to do so much within the classroom and within this school building, that it really ties into what happens out within our community and our families, and how are we getting them just not engaged in what we're doing here, but like a direct ally and advocate to work with us. And so I'm glad to see this in here. I'm just kind of, I guess, going back to Director O'Halloran, when we say like school or district champion, that can mean so many things for so many people, and not trying to have us hone in on it. But I think there's people in the community that want to help, or families that would like to be engaged and don't necessarily know exactly how. So I think, and maybe that goes into our parent coordinators, we need to see how do we align those things, because I do believe when we address that and we get them to work more with us, because I think about if you go ask on a survey, what do you think about NPS, right? And I'm not going to throw out what may be said. I think that becomes, yeah, because I love it. I'm NPS. I tell everybody, I'm NPS, absolutely. But that becomes, what do we say, what do we think, and then the vision and the end part of what do we do here. And I'm just trying to think, how do we roll that out, that it doesn't go over their head, like Director Gokagandhi said, because a lot of times if it seems like fluff or I can't understand it, we use a lot of school knowledge because we're educators or we work here. In the public, it goes over their head. I'm just going to be honest. So I guess I think I want us to hone in on how we think about not just engaging them, but getting them to be part of NPS, literally. And then I think that will move us forward within our babies, in our school environment of how we grow. But we can't do one without the other. We can't talk about the whole child without addressing the families in the city and the things that happen within our cities as well.
Thank you. Any comment?
President Peterson and members of the board, we 110% agree. That's the reason why we want champions from the community, because there's one thing we always hear when we do surveys. You know, my area, I don't hear anything from this zip code or whatever the situation may be, and we want to address that by making sure that we work in all of the communities to get those individuals out to hear what they have to say, so that we can get it back to the researchers, so that we can work on it as a team.
Director Peterson, Director Taylor, also, thank you for the continuous reminder about language, and that's part of what our research partners are going to make certain, is that it is in language that is understandable, because we have to reach down to children as well as to the community, and it's just not an educator survey. So thank you.
Follow-up?
Yeah, really quick. I guess just when we kind of hone in on what that means, I think we're going to do board governance, because how can we, as also champions of the district sitting on the board, get this out so that other individuals and community members can come in, and like, what does that look like? So I know it's a process, but like, utilize us to get that out too and to be a part of that. But thank you.
Thank you. Director Simpson, would you like to comment?
Well, I guess my question was kind of related to the champion in the district. You know, so if I'm going to speak to someone about this, what are some things that I should make sure they're aware of in terms of like what exactly they would be doing or what they would be asked to do? Because right now I'm not sure what I would be telling them their job is.
Administration.
Director Peterson, Director Siebson, Melanie Stewart, Director of Research Assessment and Data. I think that the way I envision it is that we do a lot of the arranging. We do the hard work, we do the scheduling, we do the communications out. What we want are people and faces of your community to be the host, that they are there, that they can be a drawing card, that they can help us know there's someone that people in your community go, I know them, and that's they're a good person, and then they can be part of it. If we have an in-person event, that they become the MC. We're handling the physical components of it if we do a virtual meeting, so that we want people to be able to be engaged and encouraged to engage with us, and you know who in your community will bring people to the forefront. We'll do the physical part. We'll make certain the surveys are done, the links are there, the technology is there, even work on getting locations, et cetera, but that we have a face of your community that can be supportive of the efforts to encourage people to come out.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Dr. Leonard?
The more I looked at this today, and now again here, I have less questions and really more. This is all well and good. We need to have a direct idea of what we're going to do and go and have a strategy put together to make it happen. I guess my real concern is I guess I'm concerned about how we're going to measure some of those intangibles that really have a greater effect on our district. So one thing I need to bring up is the way we handle our buildings leadership-wise. And I think I will go off for a little bit of Director Simpson off the meeting we had with our high school students today. It was very clear that we want them to have more empowerment and involvement in our district, but it really, I think they hit the nail on the head. And I was looking at, I forget which section it's on culture. And I want to make sure that we really know how to measure this. And then the one thing that I think we really struggle with as a district, leadership-wise, is accountability. I just have to be honest about this. I wouldn't want your job at times, Dr. Posley, because it really falls on you, to be honest with you. But I see some issues in our buildings when I walk around buildings and talk to people and get a lot of input from parents, et cetera. And there are some concerns about what happens in a classroom, or what if something is not happening when it comes down to leadership. And that's not always just administration. I have to say that from the start. That's not just leadership, is every adult in the building, really. So I guess I'm just bringing that out there, that I think we have to look at this very, very critically, and make sure that we know that what we're measuring on, and that we hold certain people accountable when they're not doing the plan or actually doing damage to the plan. That is my concern. I feel like our district gets dinged too much, and it sort of holds us up from actually progressing to the levels that we need to progress. So I'll leave it there.
Comments, administration?
Director Peterson, Director Leonard, thank you for your insights. I think one of the things that we're beginning with is looking at all the range of data that we already have. We have a large range, especially with the ESCC Essential School Culture and Climate Survey, where we had 60% of our staff surveyed, which is a very large percentage, and it really provides some insights. Of course, being the person I am, I want to know what the other 40% say. And so it's working to get as large of a percentage of people engaged in that. What we also are looking at are we seeing hot buttons in some of the data that we already have, that we already see maybe issues that we want to dig deeper in. We also want to look to make certain that accountability, and this is why we're also using the Baldrige framework, because where is the accountability? We're looking at some of the surveys that they have produced for all the different stakeholder groups. And that's why we have the university that is going to be helping us to actually pull out, because we could survey and have a huge survey. So we've got to balance that between really getting concise in what we need and want to know so that people will take the survey, but more importantly, that we act on it. And that's going to be the critical component. Then we can go back with a smaller survey to see if people think we have done something with their data. So that's when you're getting into the second year, third year, fourth year, et cetera, is looking at what are the key things. So thank you for your insights.
Follow-up? Director Simpson?
Yeah, one of the sections I find most interesting in this document is the column on driving forces and restraining forces. And I just want to compliment you and everybody who's working on this, because it's a big ask. And I think it can be really easy to get bogged down in the restraining forces. And just sort of like, do you have a sense of how we're going to kind of work with that so we don't get bogged down in it? Because that can really get the conversation going sideways.
Administration.
Director Peterson, Director Simpson, thank you very much. In any good continuous improvement process, you have to look at the barriers, because if you do not look at the barriers and acknowledge them, they will always exist and you'll never get around, above, through, change them. So I think it's part of the commitment is to each other and all of us that have been working on this together, is that they are not restrictive forces, that they are not restricting us from moving forward, but we still need to keep them in the forefront of our brain in our work to make certain that we are aware so that we can move forward. But it is a delicate balance.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the gavel to Vice President Taylor.
So noted.
Yeah, I find this a very, very fruitful conversation. I think it might be the first time that the board has discussed a district improvement plan in detail, and I think that's really important. I mean, I know schools go through this, and districts do too, and I assume there was a certain template that you had to follow from DPI. So when I mention some things that I think are lacking, I might be pointing my finger at DPI, but it doesn't matter. I'm not critical. I'm just saying that in terms of a strategic plan, I think, I'll just start off, I think the key concept, and I know some people have said, well, maybe we should have 3. I think we should have a key concept and then maybe a platform of 10 things, is to educate the whole child. I know that Director Taylor mentioned that. I think we've all said that. To me, it would be to educate the whole child in a safe environment to prepare them for success in college, career, and citizenship. And just sort of like a nut graph, as they say in writing. Because, I mean, the district improvement plan doesn't talk about social and emotional learning or trauma or restorative practices, and I'm not critical of that, but obviously our strategic plan has to. The plan, as currently written, calls for us to increase the number of certified staff, which we certainly should do. We all agree with that. But I didn't see an emphasis on increasing the number of teachers of color, which certainly has to be in our strategic plan, as well as staff generally. And then figuring out how to do that. Got some good ideas at the conference that some of us were at just recently. And I think just a couple other thoughts. When we talk about leadership, and I think we'll have a time to talk more about it at a SASE meeting in the future, because Director Simpson and I have put together a resolution that talks about some of those issues, and explicitly one of the whereases is this should be included in the strategic plan. Not necessarily what we exactly say, but just the notion of whether it's in a school-based or it's a district, leadership is key to having success amongst the employees. And that has to be, and I think the public can understand that. That's key. I think the public can understand social and emotional learning too. And a lot of the public can understand trauma, because our city is invaded by trauma in many ways. But I also think we have to be very clear about the fact that we need to just, as a goal of our strategic plan, parents probably won't think of this in the sense of, because they're looking more, hopefully, at their family, at their school, but we have to increase our enrollment, and that has to be strategically thought of. It can't be an afterthought. That might mean increasing the number of non-instrumentality charter schools in our district, because we've seen the impact. When they lose money, we lose money. When they lose enrollment, it has an impact on us. And we also, I think, have to be much clearer in terms of what Director Herndon said about behavior in our schools. And we obviously are all working on it. The PACE committee discusses it regularly, and how to deal with that issue. And so we get that all, you start looking at those key things that we've all agreed to. It's more than just three things. And I strongly believe that as much as a teacher, I love math and I love reading, I know that some of the kids reach and succeed in those areas when they study science and social studies and take music and art. And I know, based on our last referendum, our only successful one in many years, that art, music, FIAD, and library, those things, parents, we won by big margin, and I think we headlined the publicity around that with those things. And finally, and this is really finally, like in strategy 6, which is facilities and environment, I obviously appreciate both the need for the improvements and also its impact on our users, as it says, because having a good-sized gymnasium makes a difference between a tiny gym, or having an outdoor classroom sometimes is going to be very important. But I will remind us of a resolution that Director Herndon and I got passed recently, was that another issue around facilities and maintenance is the impact on our community as a whole in terms of what we need to strive for to meet the Intergovernmental Environmental Panel on Climate Change of target of 45% reduction. We don't have to go into details necessarily with our strategic plan, but I think a lot of people in our community are appreciating the greening of our playgrounds and to make that link to the broader issues that we face as a community and as our children right now face and their children are going to face. We should have a strategic plan that also mentions that and thinks through that. So those are some of my thoughts. I look forward to the conversations in the subsequent weeks and months, and I'm thinking about everybody else has a district to deal with. I have a big district to deal with, so I'm going to have to figure out who's going to be a star in that and help us lead that conversation.
Administration, any comment?
Chair Taylor and members of the board, that is one of the things that I was adding to a comment when we talked about the big three items. There's a number of different things that was underpinning, but I would agree that we could, headline those three, but the idea of all of the other things that we need to pull together should be under the tenant. So all of the things that you talked about will fit perfectly in one of those areas. However, we just need to work through that particular piece. And one thing about a strategic plan, it's going to take all of us working together.
Yeah.
And everyone is going to want something. And it's going to be a big item on your list. But no one else may not agree with that. And so we have to be willing to work through that part of it as well. So, and that's the reason for the champions, so that we can clearly hear from what our community wants to see. And one of the goals is to make sure that we meet those needs from our community, our students, our staff. And also there are outside key stakeholders that have asked to be a part of this as well. So we're going to be making sure that we invite those individuals to the table to, you know, have a discussion as well. So the more input, the better off our plan will be. Thank you.
So noted.
I know we're getting close to our 8 o'clock witching hour. Is there any final comments that someone would like to make? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, is there another item of business?
Mr. Chair, that was the last item of business on tonight's agenda.
And therefore, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.